Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be able to show this work here, especially with Jan's work. I really love the landscape. Actually, I stopped here in Lodi to go to the nature preserve or the wetlands to go birding with my husband and my daughter. And a lot of my work has to do with the interplay between the human and natural world, and how we sort of repurpose the natural world in the way that we imagine it. I had a whole installation actually on that theme, and these pieces are just a little bit of a different take on it. Like that piece was like an installation that you enter into. It's filled with branches, birds, drawings, and contrast these like kind of human-built environment. Like I always walk down by the Fox River in Appleton, where they have, you know, paper mills across the river, and they have factories and telephone poles, railroad crossings, and so my installation is interspersed with that. And so I've given a lot of thought to this idea of you know, how we like internalize the landscape and experience it in those little spaces, as opposed to like going out into like this beautiful nature in Montana or something where it's all wild. And also like, you know, this idea of reproduction and women and femininity and how that, you know, we're part of nature too. So some of these works are older and some are newer. The oldest work are probably these pieces here, where I was still like, you know, playing around with doll figures and like figures as objects. And I've always been interested in like interior as a metaphor for like interior life. And so like that's what those like images are emerging. And also this kind of idea of like two sides to the same thing. So some of my figurative work, especially earlier figurative work, had like two different sides to it. And then I created this piece here. I have made a lot of animal-headed figures in conjunction with human figures, and I like this idea of like nature emerging from those figures and then living inside of an environment. It actually comes from, I had an art residency at Kohler, and I created like branches and wolf heads and rabbit heads and deer heads like mounted on the wall, and a lot of the floral images from the landscape, like ordinary things you see, like the seed pods from milkweed or like sumac, branches, and everything was like very tactile, very immediate. And so like that was actually inspired by my first iteration of that installation. And then this piece was like, how do I blend that idea with figurative work, right? How do I make those come together in a different way? And these little figures up here are also from around that same time, and so are these. And these are the newer pieces along with the one in the window. The one in the window, I've been making something called thickets, which are white branches with leaves and flowers and birds and little objects embedded in them. They're just like wall sculptures. And then I thought, well, you know, how am I going to incorporate that as part of a figurative work? And so I started thinking about nature forms as being stand-ins for the heads of the figures. And those are kind of where these started to go, where they're experimenting with like grasses and textures and birds and florals, and like, do we really need to see the figure, or are they just iconic images that are, you know, making us think a little bit more deeply about like how we relate to the natural world and how we are part of it. I don't know if anyone has any questions. All of these pieces are made of porcelain. They're fired at like cone 6. I don't know if that means anything to anybody, in electric kiln. And I spent a lot of time outside and in my studio at my house. So that's where a lot of my ideas come from. Right now I'm making a couple of figures that are a little bit like the one in the window, but experimenting with a little bit more color, and going back to that idea of like twin figures that go together. And I love these paintings next to it because they really speak to like this idea of landscape and interior landscape, and also the landscape that we enter into physically. And I just love all the tones and colors and how they're very specific, and they contrast really nicely with this work. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, you know, feel free to ask me. They're all coil built for the most part. So, yeah.
I don't have a question as a comment. I really like how you have some of the sculpture pieces, they're not glazed.
Oh, yeah.
And some
Actually, that's something I talk to the students about a lot, is like contrasting surfaces, you know, like satin as opposed to shiny color as opposed to muted, and, you know, just like is something that creates, you know, a visual focus in something. Just that idea of contrast. Yeah, I teach at St. Norbert College in De Pere. So I do all the 3D, and then anything else that needs to be done. Like I teach world art history and foundations, and then I take students to Italy every other year, and yeah. It is nice. It is a lot of work though. I had to make the class, because I was like, my friends have a studio there, and I was like, I think I'm gonna bring a class there, but I had to, like, you know, make the class and organize everything and do all the stuff, so yeah. It is nice though. Yeah. How else am I gonna get to Italy? I don't know.
What were your thoughts behind the two pieces there with the little ears?
Oh, you know, these are actually from when I was at Lawrence University, so they're probably from, oh God, a while ago. I just like, they're kind of an interplay between like animal and human figures, or like childlike and adult figures. And I always like open them up and like kind of a metaphor for the interior life, right? And how we like think about things and dreaming. I guess that's like I think Kel talked a little bit about dreaming. I mean, I love this idea of like childhood and dolls are like, they're figures, but like, you know, we animate them. They're not like, right? When you go to the thrift store and you're like, oh, someone loved this doll, now it's like here in this plastic bag, and like, you know, if someone buys it and does something with it, then all of a sudden it has like a meaning again. So these are really based on those ideas, this like group of work, yeah. And that one too, or everyone has their two sides, right? Or their, yeah. Yeah.
Could you talk? I don't know. Well, what you just said I find really interesting, the two sides thing. Like, I think there is so much mirroring in the work that is with us right now, whether it be sort of this identical mirroring or maybe an assumed mirroring that happens with like girl and dog. So I was going to ask a different question, but I'm more interested in that question that I just came up with right now.
Yeah, I mean, because like what's important to most people is like relationships, or like your relationship with the self, or like how you see yourself. And so I think that's why I have an interest in that, like, or different iterations of, I love the idea of like a doppelganger, you know, or like this other versions of yourself that could exist. So, I mean, that's just my investigation of it. Like in art, I really like the idea of like leaving things open to interpretation, letting people like kind of come to their own conclusions about something rather than being like, this is exactly what it's about. I just like find that less interesting. So I think for me, it's okay for people to have their own ideas about it. So.
I guess I'll ask my other question.
Okay.
Because I don't want to take it up, but could you talk a little bit more? I didn't realize that they were coil built.
Well, not all of them are. Like these are coil built. Those, these. This is like, I made a press mold and made the base. I mean, these are all like hand formed. And then some of these are solid built. But these are coil built too. Yeah. Yeah. You just, you know, people think coils are like not, I tell my students coils just aren't sexy. But like, you know, like you can make anything out of coils and just smooth them, and yeah, it takes a lot of time to make things. I always think, oh, it's not gonna take me that long, and then it takes 3 times longer than I think it's gonna take. Yeah.
So the figures of the women, are those are solid porcelain?
No, they're not solid now. Like you make them solid and then you cut them up and like scoop out the inside. Yeah. But this is like a common thing for like a lot of people make big figurative work. They do that. I mean, I don't know which one takes less time. Honestly, it probably doesn't really matter that much. But well, I also have larger bodies of work having to do with objects. So, you know, I'll like make almost like a still life out of porcelain, and some of those objects were kind of small, like hammers or things. So I would cut them up and dig them out, and then I was like, oh, maybe I'll make some of the figures that way. I don't know. So, yeah. I mean, I just use whatever way works for me for building things. Yeah.
Is there any significance to the two
Yeah, you know, I think there were 3 of these figures originally, and there were like, there was another figure on the other side, so it was like a triple, yeah. But the other one, I think someone bought it or something like years ago. Yeah, it was like, so they're all supposed to be like interacting a little bit together, so yeah. That's why that one's like this, and this one's like, no, this is the, I do like that glaze. I forgot about it. And now I'm like, I think I have to find it again. Yeah. But these I don't have any areas that are raw. I started using more glaze, so yeah.
Are there any mythologies playing out in the works that we have here? I know that that's one of the interests of yours, like sort of story and...
Oh yeah, like, I mean, the piece in the window I think is Daphne, which I don't know if you know the story. It's like a myth where I think this like river nymph or something is being chased by Apollo, that he's gonna like, you know, grab her. And I think her dad like turns her into like a tree or something like that, you know. It's like, there's like a famous sculpture by Bernini of it, you know. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. Not that I am not Bernini, just the concept of it. Like, you know, like this idea that we're part of nature, I think. And there's a lot of mythology that relates to that, right? Especially like ancient Greek ideas, and or even like I'm trying to think of the Indian, I don't know, I won't go on. Like, yeah, oh, the Yastis, yeah, maybe that's them. There's like, yeah.
Are there any other questions for Debbie?
No?
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thank you. Huh?
Hello, thanks for coming. I'm not nearly as verbal as that. I sort of live in a fantasy land, and I want to feel as calm as I feel when I look at these paintings. So I'm looking for places to paint that make me feel like this, like the world is gorgeous, and we're so lucky to be here, and we should take care of it. And I paint things that change daily. They disappear. Been working on something that just now it's gone. Years ago, I painted a place that I really loved, and it's planted with corn now, and the trees are all gone. And you know, it's. I wanna record what we have. About 3 years ago, I started working with gouache as well as oils. I love oil painting. Oil is king. Just ask me anytime, I will always say that. But gouache is really fun, and it behaves a lot like oil in that you build paintings from dark to light, like oil painting. So it's a great companion, and some of these pieces the little pieces are gouache, the 6x8s. The rest of them are all oil. And some of them are explorations of pieces that I want to make big, but other times it's just, okay, so I did it that way, now what if I do something a little different? And then sometimes I just like the scene, so I'll do it again. I'm working with a fairly limited palette, and it works out well because I started most everything here outside, and then I take it into the studio. If I've stopped caring whether it's all completely plein air. It has to be a good painting. I have to love it, and if the painting needs something, I'll put it in after I get back to my studio. I'm not a plein air snob anymore. And I paint to please myself, and I am delighted that anybody else is pleased with my work. Because, well, it's just an honor. I don't know what else to say, but if you have questions, I would be happy to answer them.
What are some of your favorite places to paint?
That's a good question. A recent new favorite is Cherokee Marsh. I'd never painted on the other side of the marsh. There's great parks everywhere. All of these are right near my house, most of them. Indian Lake, but then most of these little ones are from Badger Mill Creek. And that's one of those things that's disappearing. It's a lovely little creek. It's fed by wastewater that's been treated from the Madison Metropolitan Sewage District, and they've decided that they can't afford to scrub the phosphorus from the water, so they cut off the flow, and now it's just subject to rainfall. And so all of those are like these two big ones. That's the creek. It's beautiful, but it's starting to dry up. And at least I got there before it did.